It fills such a need, especially for individuals like myself who've experienced trauma. And even those that I think haven't experienced a lot of trauma or any trauma at all, but just deal with chronic stress. The tools that you have given me in my toolkit are just, I use every single day. Welcome to the Rhythm Restoration Podcast, the show rooted in scripture and scientific research, where you will learn to achieve maximum success in your business and personal life by actually working less hours. You will conquer burnout, find your purpose, restore your passion, and be more productive than ever. If you think it's too good to be true, it's not. It's exactly how God designed our bodies. And the science of our rhythms has actually been around for over 7 decades. But no one has ever looked at it through a biblical lens until now. Hi, I'm your host, Liz Bagwell, a published scientist turned healthcare executive, wife and mom of 3, who burned out at the top and found my purpose at rock bottom. Follow along with me as I leave everything behind in pursuit of helping others restore God's design for their personal lives and businesses. This will be raw, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it's like when you stop running and start living in pursuit of what truly matters. Together, you'll cultivate a more balanced, joy-filled life, gaining the peace and freedom only found when leaning into God's design for your mind, body, heart, and soul. Welcome back to the Rhythm Restoration Podcast. Over the last few weeks, we have discussed ways that you can work to restore your mind. In planning out this series, I felt that it was super important to bring in my very own therapist to speak with us not just about our journey together, but specifically about the ways that we went about restoring my mind together. So I hope you enjoy this episode. There are many, many, many gold nuggets of wisdom in there that Dr. Barbie shares. Enjoy. Welcome, Dr. Barbie. What an honor and privilege it is to have you on today, and how fun that we get to spend this time together looking back on our last 3 years. I can't believe it's been 3 years.
I can't believe it either. Thank you so much, Liz, for having me here and giving me the opportunity to talk about some of the things I love to talk about the most, and also to get to reflect on your story.
Yes, thank you. I have spoken about you on just about every single podcast episode up to this point, except for maybe the last one. So I'm so thrilled that our listeners get to, 1, hear your voice, but also 2, get to listen to your perspective, as you've been such an integral part of this journey that I'm on. This is episode 6, and this is episode 3 in our series on restoration of the mind. So next week, we'll be moving on to restoration of the body. And I thought having you on, Dr. Barbie, would close us out speaking about how our minds and bodies are connected at a high level. Mm-hmm. I thought it would be a perfect segue into next week's episode. It's going to really center around how to listen to our bodies. And you have done a phenomenal job in teaching me how to do that. So I think it's perfect to have you on today, and just thrilled. And to kick us off, I thought we'd start by you telling us a little bit about yourself. So why you decided to go into the mental health field, your background, your practice, all the things.
Yeah. Okay. So the mental health field is actually a second career for me. I did a little shift after having been in academia and education for about 18 years. And mainly one of the main reasons I decided to do that, first, I love working with people one-on-one, but I was pretty tired of being the expert, in academia. The teacher, the professor is the expert. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to help people find that expert within them, right? And not have to have all the answers, right? Because I don't have all the answers. Sometimes don't have all the answers. But, I really believe that all those answers and everything that we have to heal is already within us. So I love doing that with clients, like helping them tap into that. And so that's why I did that transition. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and a somatic experiencing practitioner. And so that was an interesting shift for me as well. I went into this feeling very analytical, very kind of like psychoanalysis. I thought that's what I was going to do. I used to spend a lot of time in my head, sometimes still do. And I got this great piece of advice from a fellow therapist who said, maybe I should try doing something that doesn't come so naturally. And I was like, okay. And somatic psychotherapy, somatic experiencing, I didn't think would come very naturally, but it has changed everything for me personally and in my practice. I feel that it's just really the foundation of all the work that I get to do with clients.
That's awesome. So you said somatic psychotherapy. Tell us a little bit about what that means specifically in the whole scheme of the mental wellness, mental health field.
Yes. So somatic is of the body, right? And so psychotherapy of the body really doesn't mean that we're going to just only be paying attention to the body, but it is that interconnection between the psyche, the mind, and our physical selves, right? And our nervous system, and just how we hold so much trauma in our body. So when you're in a session with a somatic practitioner, what you would probably experience is a little bit of everything, right? Like, so a little bit of talking that's going to bring up an emotion, going to bring up a sensation in the body, and we're going to follow that sensation to see what else might be locked in there. So sometimes it can be really profound and like this big realization. Other times, most often, it's really nuanced, kind of slow, but eventually, and I think this was, you would probably attest to this, Liz, eventually, it's like you wake up one day and you're like, wow, like I responded to this thing so differently than I would have 6 months ago. And you're thinking, oh, it's paying off. Like, this is what somatic psychotherapy is doing for me. It helps us just have so much more ease, flexibility, curiosity in our day to day.
I love that. Yeah. So it's not really kind of sticking to a script of one specific type of methodology. It's really kind of a blend of all of those things, having that somatic really as the foundation, and then pulling in those other like EMDR or cognitive behavioral therapy when it's needed within that session. Does that sound about right?
Yes, absolutely. It is more of an approach than something more, kind of like dictated, like
Perfectly defined. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So cool. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So tell us a little bit more about your practice. So you have a practice. Do you have any partners? Are you guys currently accepting new patients?
Yes. So our practice is called Simply Being, and we are in Nashville, Tennessee with Liz. And really, it's a small group practice that I founded and run. Right now, we are 4 therapists and a new intern that's coming on board. And we feel very much like a community. My goal was never to create a practice that was so big that it just felt like everything and everyone were just numbers and file cases and all of that. So my goal was it to feel like family and a home away from home. And so, yeah, so everyone here does some version of somatic psychotherapy. And
Do you do telehealth? That's one thing that I meant to ask. Yes.
Yes. Yes. So we do telehealth, and outside of Tennessee, we do provide coaching services, somatic coaching, which is something that you can read more about on the website as well. There's like a separate little website that you can click on. And so we do that. I'm currently not accepting clients myself. I will eventually again, but we are accepting clients. Yeah. Oh, and we also have a wellness brand that we launched recently. It's called Simply Be Well, and it's a sensory wellness brand. So it's all about using our senses to feel into the world and to help regulate our systems.
That is amazing. And it's been so fun to watch you launch that too and grow the practice over the last 3 years. And it's exciting that the specific field of somatic psychotherapy is growing enough to where you have to build out your team. And so again, it fills such a need, especially for individuals like myself who've experienced trauma. And even those that I think haven't experienced a lot of trauma or any trauma at all, but just deal with chronic stress, the tools that you have given me in my toolkit are just, I use every single day, whether it has anything to do with, any trauma, or it's just like, my kid is going crazy at the grocery store and I'm like, okay. Or like the other night I was teaching my son, my oldest, he was struggling to go to sleep. And I was like, let's do ocean breathing, which is what you taught, is something that you taught me. And so, working with Vincent on teaching him how to do ocean breathing and helping him go to sleep. So it's not just, I want people to understand that it's not just for those that have had as much trauma as I have, but really just, I think it's great for everybody personally. So yes. Let's see. So I mentioned in previous episodes that I found you in January of 2020. So that is pre-pandemic, which is wild. And I found you on psychologytoday.com. I think you're still on there. I need to go on and give you a review. I haven't done that yet, but I need to do that. But when we moved to Nashville in January of 2020, we moved from Chattanooga. And I don't think that I've put this on the podcast yet, but in December of 2019, my middle child, Sterling, who's now 4, which is crazy that he's 4, but when he was 9 months old, he spent 9 days in a pediatric ICU in Chattanooga for RSV and pneumonia. And it was, they told me several times while I was there, you may not leave with him. And he went into respiratory failure in my arms. They whisked him back. And it was nearly an hour before, like, we thought he had passed away. And so I knew, because I had been through so much trauma before and had a lot of therapy at that point for trauma, that I knew when I got to Nashville that I needed help going through that. But what I didn't realize at the time was that that experience with Sterling, plus all that I was going on with work, was just too much. And so, do you want to talk about kind of our first couple of meetings together? I think our first 2 were pre-pandemic. And then after that, it was I think we've done telehealth since then.
Yes.
Can you talk to me? I know, isn't it crazy? Can you talk to me a little bit about how, maybe not just for myself, but in general, how you decide on what to focus on first with clients? And then also, what does it look like from a clinical standpoint in terms of developing a plan? So what I mean by that is, do you kind of think through, I know you said analytical, you're very analytical. Do you think through with each client, okay, they're here, I kind of want to get them here, what's the best way to do that? Or do you really let the client lead and just pull out tools from your own toolbox in order to help get them to where they feel like they want to be?
Yeah, those are great questions. And it's kind of a blend of both. I'll explain a little bit more. Like, when folks come in to see me, they often have experienced some kind of trauma. That being said, some folks come in and they're, saying, I've had chronic stress or I have a lot of anxiety. And as I get to know them, the trauma kind of surfaces because maybe they hadn't named it trauma just yet. But because most of my folks do come in knowing that they've experienced something really hard that they need to integrate, our first session is really it's very getting to know you, building rapport, differently than maybe in other sessions where you might be asked a bunch of questions about your history. I have found that it's not entirely trauma informed to have someone come in the first time and tell me every bad thing that's ever happened to them.
I think I did that, but
you might have all at once, and woof, off
just
you
get
go.
it out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really try, obviously sometimes, the boundaries get a little stretched out, but yeah, so I really try to just help them feel like, okay, I'm safe here, because so much of this work is about feeling safe in your body, feeling safe within the context of whatever environment you're in, whatever relationship you're engaging with. So that's typically our first session. We continue to build rapport the whole time, obviously. But I think of the treatment of most clients kind of at 3, like I think of it in like 3 tiers, right? So there's the immediate, here are some tools, here are some strategies to help you with what's going on in your day-to-day or in this present moment. Most people come in with, because something like they've noticed something about themselves that they want to, kind of work on. So that's one tier. A second tier is kind of helping to reprocess, right, some of that trauma from the past that has come up. And the third tier is really, it's like not really separate. It's kind of a mixture of everything, but it's really helping a client such as yourself grow the capacity within their nervous system. So that's really the end goal. Like, yes, we're going to process the trauma. We're going to integrate all the things that have happened, absolutely, and bring back all the fragmented parts of us that, we've scattered around along the way. But really, it's about building capacity in your nervous system so that when things happen, because they inevitably will, that you will be able to handle those things and be able not just to handle, but to like really thrive through them.
I love that.
Yeah.
It answers the questions beautifully. So beautifully. And I can attest to all of those things completely. And tell me, and this is fun. Tell me what it's been like to work with me as a client, what that journey has been kind of from those first, couple sessions, now 3 years later, here I am, have this consulting business, have this podcast. And also, I want you to know, like, this would absolutely not happen if it wasn't for you. But from your view, what has that been like as a clinician to see that?
Yeah. Well, first, let me just say everything that has happened for you was already there for you to like access, but I will take the compliment, I guess. I'm not good with that. But, if we think about our journey together, first of all, you came ready. Sometimes folks come to therapy and they feel like they think they're ready, but there's not a lot of readiness really, not emotionally, not in their system. And so there's a lot of just kind of walls that we have to work through. You already came kind of ready and knowing you had done a lot of therapy. So I think of it as, this is maybe the wrong word, but kind of primed for the work, right?
Yeah.
Like you were at that place. And I think back to like all the chronic stress that you were experiencing and everything that was going on then and now. And this, I couldn't have expected or wanted a better outcome for you. Right? Like this is everything has changed for you. And that's what I mean. Like those new, like, yes, if we think about today versus 3 years ago, obvious change, but like there's increments, right? Throughout the way that are really kind of nuanced. But, in terms of our work, we've done so many different things. We've done EMDR within the somatic perspective. We have done strategy building. We've worked on self-care. We've worked on the things about your children, right? Like, because it's not like, I'm not going to spend all of our time with clients in the past. Like so much of what's happening in the nervous system is happening right now. And so I work with what's happening in the moment and then kind of tap into like maybe where that began and reprocess that. But with you, it's just, I don't know, it's just been wonderful. It's always wonderful to see, what happens it's not at the end because everyone, I feel like the journey, but it's always wonderful to see those big changes.
It was so cool at our last session. I think it was last week, maybe, or a week before that. You used a term that I'd never heard before. And of course I forgot it, but what is that? Because I want to bring that up and talk more about that. Cause I want people to see that, and especially for those that have been through a ton of trauma and do, like myself, have PTSD, like, what it's like on the other side. That's a lot of what I want them to get from this and glean from this, is that hope that there is so much hope and the ability to live such a happy, joyful, just blessed life where you don't have to walk around every day just miserable. And so remind me what that term was.
Yeah, it was post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Love it.
I was like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I told you, I was like, remind me what that word is when we record, because just so cool. I love that. And I do feel like, and it's so neat when we have you and I, when we're in a session and then you're like, Liz, like 6 months ago, you wouldn't have been able to do this or think about that growth. And so you've helped me really be able to see that in myself. And also, one thing as you were talking that I didn't think about, you've helped me so much learn how, I mean, a million things, but one of the big things that really helped to lead into that, like what is rhythm restoration, is truly listening to our bodies. And I talk a lot in the podcast in episodes 2 and 3 about kind of the science behind the ultradian rhythm and the circadian rhythm. And I think in order for us to absolutely live into that, you have to learn how to listen to your body. And, an example of that is the other day, I was pretty tired. I worked for a couple hours and then I was like, I could keep going, but I'm listening to my body right now and I need to lay down.
Yeah.
And what I did was I laid down for it was like 45 minutes. And then I had so much more energy to get me through and made tremendous strides in terms of productivity the rest of the day because I was listening to my body versus I think if I had tried to, as I would have, a few years ago, really power through, I wouldn't have been able to get a lot done. I would have been distracted. I would have been just burned out and tired. And so, thank you for helping me to be able to listen to my body more, which that's going to be such a big focus on our next episode is it'll be episode 7 is how to listen to our body. And so I'll share some tips and tricks on that. But I think that's a really good segue for us to talk about how can you give me really a high level explanation of how our brain, so I've talked in the last 2 podcasts, I believe, how our mind rather, how we can restore our mind. And this next series is how we can restore our body. So talk to me about how the nervous system is really kind of like that conduit, bringing together our mind and our body.
Can I just say, I would have never believed it if someone had told me 10 years ago that I would like talking about science. But this is one of my favorite topics.
Yay!
Yeah. So, essentially, we all have what we learned in 7th grade science, an autonomic nervous system. And the best way to think about that without getting technical in terms is just like we have like that part of our system that is the accelerator that gets us moving, that gets us pushing through, that gets us excited, like whatever it might be. And then we have that other part of our nervous system that is a brake, right? And that brake has almost like it has 2 branches. And those are like, okay, let's do like a nice little soft brake. I see the yellow light, it's far away, I'm, slowing down. Or like an emergency brake, which would not feel great if we actually had an emergency brake and we pulled it, it would feel very jarring. So essentially, our autonomic nervous system is what I was saying earlier, that we want to like build capacity within that to tolerate and kind of like hold the different difficult things that happened for us. So all of us have probably heard about fight and flight, also freeze. Now there's fawn. I say now because now we've labeled it. It's always been there. But, in our nervous system, we all have like a defense mechanism, a survival mechanism that we go to because it's worked for us in the past, right? Like we access all of them at all times. But there's one typically that is like our go-to, right? So whether it's fight, whether it's flight, whether it's just dissociating and freezing, we all have that. And we use that in real life to like make sure that we're safe. But our nervous system is always kind of gauging, safety. Do I approach? Do I move away from? And that it's connected to our brains in terms of like, if we have something called the amygdala in our brain, and it's a small little almond-shaped little piece of our brain that is the alarm system. And it uses our senses, right? Like our senses are like the language of the amygdala, if you will, right? Like it uses our senses to kind of scope out an environment and see like, am I safe or am I not safe? And if we have experienced trauma, then we often feel unsafe, even if objectively maybe it is a very safe place, right? Because our nervous system is gauging for any little thing, right? That might feel like reminiscent of the trauma. And so we need to move away from that. So it could be someone's tone of voice, or it could be, it could be something that we see that reminds us of something, or so the way somebody looks at us, right? And people will be like, oh, don't be so sensitive. And it's not that anyone's being necessarily sensitive. It's that their nervous system is like a sensitive alarm, right? So like if, some alarm systems, you have to like recalibrate them, because if something falls, they go off, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Such a good analogy. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a broken alarm system. It just needs a little recalibrating, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So that amygdala, we're feeling into it. We have we then engage our fight or our flight or whatever it might be. And then, we have this response that maybe feels like really big, and we don't understand where that's coming from. So I think I kind of went all over the place, but essentially our brain is connected to an autonomic nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system has a couple of branches that are like telling us go or move away from. Basically, we are wired to survive, and we are wired to connect, which I can get into in a minute. But and essentially we have all these survival mechanisms. They are not failures on our part. They are not, we don't want to eradicate them, because we do want to survive. We just want to kind of let them know that we can also feel comfortable, right? And not everything has to be that hypervigilant state.
Yes.
Does that answer?
Total sense. Yes. And one thing as you were talking that it made me think of is, tell us, and you can just speak a minute on it, how our nervous system, and when it is, maybe, I don't want to say unwell, but when it is in the hyper vigilant state all the time, or it's under chronic stress and it doesn't have that capacity, how that affects us physically.
Yes. Yeah. It so much, right? So like, for example, chronic pain, we might experience a lot of tension in our upper body, tension in our neck, tension in our jaw, giving us headaches. Migraines are a big one. We might experience IBS issues, right? Because our vagus nerve is connected to our tummy, and our gut has so much. It's like another brain in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
So we might have IBS issues. It can impact our reproductive system. It could impact our digestive system. It could create situations in which, like fibromyalgia, for example, a lot of autoimmune diseases have been linked to chronic stress. So the reality is, and there was a study a while back around like, if we had all these traumatic events, like what can we expect, right? So to speak. And it's called the ACEs study, and adverse childhood experience. Yeah. And if you have like, let's say 5 different things on this adverse childhood experiences, what they found is that folks really do end up having a lot of medical issues, not because their behavior, initially I thought, oh, well, their behavior is different, so then it's leading to this. No. Yep. It's just literally their nervous system is like, no, their body's like, okay, you've held on to this stress way too long. That to say, I don't want to scare anyone, because if we have had a lot of trauma in our past, resiliency is also a big piece of like what kind of counteracts that, right? So the resiliency factors in our past, the ones that we are building in our current state. So there's always opportunity for healing and growth. We just know that if we've had these kinds of experiences, there's a lot at stake, right? So we do definitely want to do the work to feel better.
Totally agree. And I remember the first time I heard that study, it was actually in a book. So by J.D. Vance, he wrote Hillbilly Elegy. Yeah. And at the very end of that book, he talks about that study. I remember where I was actually in a Kroger parking lot listening to it on Audible, but I remember him talking about it. And I met every single one. I mean, there's like, all these questions. And Dr. Barbie, as you know, like I met every single one of those. And there is a lot at stake, because the results were terrifying for me in terms of what that impact would be on my own personal lifespan. And so that was a big wake up call for me. And why I continued therapy and medication was I need to, like you said, take care of those parts of me so that I can live longer and I can, heal, because we do heal, just like you mentioned just a second ago. And that really helps to restore those parts of ourselves that are hard to restore, but also so important to take care of, not just for ourselves, but also our kids too.
Yeah, yeah, for our entire community, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned a moment ago that I would come back to this, and it just hit me, but it connects. I mentioned we're wired to survive, and we're also wired to connect, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that
Yes.
soft break that I was alluding to, right, that parasympathetic nervous system can really, like, if we see someone that is loving and caring or gives us a hug, or we're with our friends, like, and we're sharing whatever's happened and we're received with empathy, like that, in it's magic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like in community, when we have a strong support system that is non-judgmental, that is not blaming, that is empathetic and compassionate, like so much healing happens. So oftentimes the way someone is received after a trauma is almost more damaging than the trauma itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if they're blamed for the thing that happened or not believed or judged, which I see all the time. And it's heartbreaking because it's like, if that had been different, right? They'd probably be in a different place right now. That being said, part of the therapeutic relationship is providing some of that connection and helping folks find that connection elsewhere, or know how to like just build that connection or just feed into that connection a little more.
Yes. And I can attest to that. And I know I've talked about it a little bit in our sessions, but God was just so amazing and planning out like where I was at the exact time of this, and that. And when I think about my neighbors, like, I mean, everybody, we all needed our neighbors during COVID, but I really needed them. I was on medical leave. I had just gone through a ton of trauma, and it was just such a blessing to be able to move in to a place where they did every single thing that you just said, non-judgmentally and just loving unconditionally. And they were such a huge part of my healing as well. And you're right. I can't imagine if I didn't have that, where I'd be right now. And so I do think, and I spoke a little bit about this. I am watching our time, but I spoke a little bit about this a couple episodes ago. But just the important need for connection, and the important need for us to help others heal. And that's a part of why I'm doing this, and why I'm sharing my journey and taking all my skeletons out of the closet, is to help hopefully connect with others, be vulnerable, and help others to heal. So I can 1,000% attest to that research.
I know that this podcast is going to do that, right? For
Oh,
all the
thank
folks
you.
that are listening. So it's so important, like you said, airing my skeletons. Like the reality is that we all have stuff. And when
Mm-hmm.
we hear someone, bravely sharing their story, and talking, like that can be so inspiring and also validating, normalizing all the things, right, that we need for healing. So
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. Before we close out, I thought one thing that we could talk about is the wheel. So you and I, back when I was on medical leave, created, in an attempt to help get me ready for when I started working again, we created this one sheet of paper, and I actually used that for over 2 years, and I actually still have it. I don't need it right now, thank goodness, but I would look at it every single day. And so tell me about that tool, what it
Yeah.
is, how people can use it, and then anything else that you want to share in terms of tools for
Yeah.
folks listening.
So you're referring to the self-care wheel. It is not my
Yes.
invention. It's out there. You can Google it,
Yeah.
the self-care wheel. But essentially, it's a way of like considering what self-care looks like. We think of self-care and we often think of like, I got a massage, or I got a
Mhm.
manicure. I did a bubble bath, or I don't know,
Yeah.
I went on a walk. All those things are absolutely aspects of self-care. They're not the only things. And so it's important to kind of like access self-care in every aspect of our life. And for you at the time, there was just so much chronic stress at work, right? And that's what corporations are, right? Like they
Mm-hmm.
very, very stressful. It's hard to like
Mm-hmm.
navigate a
Yeah.
lot of what comes at us in a situation like that. And so the self-care wheel helps to kind of identify like, what are some of those boundaries maybe that I have at work? And what am I going to do for myself to make sure that I make it through the day and that I feel, comfortable when it's over? I have, it
Mm-hmm.
hasn't just bleeded into itself and now it's like Friday and I'm like, what happened all week?
Yeah.
So the self-care wheel has, the psychological and emotional perspective, a spiritual perspective, a personal, professional, and a physical perspective. And what we did with you is we kind of went through each one of these areas and identified things that were doable for you, right? Like the ways in which you could integrate, like a short walk in the middle of your day, or that couple of minute exercise that we always do at the beginning of session just to help us settle, and just being really intentional. And one of the reasons why this work was really, I think, helpful for you is because you were very intentional,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you did the things, you were willing to try things. So if anybody goes to therapy, my advice is just try things, be
Yeah.
curious.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so really think about self-care, not just in terms of like the things that we always hear about, or in terms of things we have to spend money on. Like you don't have to spend money for self-care. And you don't, people will be like, I don't have time for self-care. It's like, well, we can integrate self-care into every aspect of our life. So everybody has like a minute to just stop and notice what's going on in their body. And that can be a form of, kind of psychologically checking in, somatically checking in, that can really shift things for us.
Yeah, I love that. And we will definitely link that to the show notes and have that available for everybody. But yeah, I loved that. One of the things that you had mentioned, and I'm just going to say this briefly, when we were developing my plan was, I was like, oh, I don't know if I have time. And you're like, all right, what is something that you really love to do? And I was like, I enjoy washing my face, and or putting on makeup. And you're like, okay, well, just let's make that a somatic experience for you. And then you helped me figure out how to do that. And so it felt like when I was doing that for myself, like I wasn't just checking off a box, like I was actually caring for myself.
Yes.
And it really changed the way that I thought about that. So that's just a quick example. I'm doing a time check.
Yeah.
So anything, the last episode that I did, I spoke about your website. And I shared the link for that, especially the vocal meditations. But if you were to give the people listening in kind of one key thing that they could add to their day that would help restore their minds, what would it be?
God, I'm torn between two. So I'm
Okay, give two. Why don't you give two?
Okay, one of them is something that I call glimmer moments, right? Like being aware.
This is my favorite. Oh my gosh, this was so life-changing. Okay, yay. Okay.
And I think of it in terms of our senses, right? So like maybe you sat down to watch television and you cuddled with your favorite blanket and you just felt into that. Or maybe, I don't know, you went on a walk and you felt the grass underneath your feet. Or the breeze of the fan. I have a fan right now. So like the breeze and how that feels. It's not just like acknowledging it and say like, oh, I feel the breeze. But it's like taking a moment to just be in that glimmer, right? Our life is just a series of moments. And the more moments that we can find and identify as glimmers of ease, glimmers of simplicity, of wellness, whatever you want to think of the glimmer as, just the lovelier our experience is going to be as a human and in this world. So glimmer moments. And the other thing is, to do what, would be called, the psychologist Tara Brach calls it the sacred pause. It's similar to what it is what we do at the beginning of sessions. And it's just like every once in a while, just like quiet down, sit somewhere, really feel into the texture of that chair, that, your feet on the ground, really get grounded and just take a moment to just notice. Really, that's all you have to do. It's like, it's amazing that all you have to do is just notice. Even if it's uncomfortable, we don't have to change what we're noticing is happening in our body. We just want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those
I love that.
Little two things. Yeah.
Yes, I love those. And going back to the glimmer moments, that has been one of the most life-changing things for me. And I actually think there is some science around that. I'm not going to get into that, but I think there's some science around that. And for me, it was hard because I'd always be like, okay, when I'm doing gratitude, I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for their health. I'm thankful. And you were like, no. God already knows that you're thankful about those things. Let's look at these little things that you do throughout the day that you see that you're thankful for. And it totally changes the way that you look at your day because you do those glimmer moments. Like, I'll see a flower on the ground now and I'm like, oh, that's so pretty. Whereas before it just, you just kind of run through your day and not really look for that. But I actually spend so much of my day looking for it, looking for those things and going and thinking it. So thank you. Thank you for your time. Anything else?
Okay. I hate to promote something, but I will.
Oh, please do. No. Please do.
No, I'm just going to say, the glimmer moments are so special to me that I worked with a designer. We created a glimmer journal. It's called Simply Shine, and it's available on our website. That being said, I told you all self-care, you don't need to pay for it. So you don't need the glimmer journal to do this work. But if you want a way to organize it, check it out. It's on the Simply Be Well shop site.
Awesome. One thing I think I'll do is in my next giveaway, I'll include some of those and give them away. So I will buy some from the website and then I will give some away. Some glimmer, spread some glimmer.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I have too. And you mean the world to me. And I hope you know that. And everyone go and check out her website. Go and look into Somatic Psychotherapy. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Dr. Barbie or myself. I know that we'll also link her socials so that you can find her on there as well as her email if you have any questions. So thank you so much, Dr. Barbie. Have a wonderful day. And I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you.
And all that you do.
Bye.
Bye. Did you know that one of the biggest secrets to come out recently, and it's really not even just a secret, it's a true biohack to living a longer life, and this is scientifically proven because otherwise I would not be saying it, is human connection, that true human connection that we all long for. So let's really connect, and I mean it. I cannot wait to go on this journey with you and help discover and restore your individual rhythm and life. You can find me on Instagram at LizBagwell7 or head on over to my website, rhythmrestoration.co, that's .co, not .com, where I share all things life, family, other biohacks, and simple ways to lean into God's true design for your life. It would mean the world to me if you could share this episode with a friend, family member, or coworker, or all three, and if you left me a review on your favorite podcast app. Thank you truly from the bottom of my heart for listening to the Rhythm Restoration Podcast. All my light and love, Liz.